Now, this has been a head-spinning week in terms of America's foreign policy. Most immediately, President Trump had an unannounced 90-minute phone call with Vladimir Putin. Then Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Russia's representatives to discuss Ukraine. And what came out of those talks seemed more like a partnership with Russia than a peace negotiation. Vice President Vance downplayed any threat from Russia, while Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth also indicated that European defense was no longer an American priority. So, Ben, should we actually be pulling back from NATO and Europe, as Hegseth and Vance both sort of indicated?
Should we, or are we? Because we are, by tone, at the very least, with rhetoric. It has been consistent that it's America first. There has been no straying from that. That was what he campaigned on. That is what people voted for, and that is what he is saying. Now, where we go from there, we know he's transactional, and he is looking to get something in return from everybody. The one big problem that he had as the 55th president, right, because he's the 57th president now, was
47th.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you. Was the fact that America contributes the most in defense globally. And that was brought up in Munich this week, where J.D. Vance said, it's America first. That's the bottom line. You have to step up. We're tired of our speeches being suppressed and our what we're trying to say and put out there, and yet we're still contributing all of this globally.
I might argue that, selling out Ukraine and making these deals with Putin is a specific view of America first. I would argue that those things aren't necessarily America first. These are Trump first, all right? And, with people like Musk going and aligning with Alternative for Germany, please don't call that America first to me. All right, this is really moving us to the right, away from democracy and freedom and more toward authoritarianism. And so I just blanch at that America first, because it makes it sound like this is all for us, and it's certainly not.
But we built a post-war security structure that's been remarkably effective and help make us prosperous.
And that is part of the problem, not building defense or security, but here's what the average American sees, that the European Union can do just as much as the U.S. when it comes to protecting their own backyard. Consider the size of the EU economy. It's at 20 trillion and second only to the US's, which is at 30 trillion. One could go so far as to argue that the EU could do even more, considering the national debt. EU's national debt is at 16 trillion, which is less than half of the US's 36 trillion. But then here's the other thing. Despite the fact that the EU is in a better position to do more, the U.S. has, in fact, done much more than any other country, including the EU as a whole. So that's what average Americans see is, why not? Forget about the America First piece. What about everybody pay their fair share? I feel like I'm channeling Chad here, but so be it.
And that is the bottom line, that we could get sidetracked on the definition of what Trump means by America First and what other people mean by that. But the bottom line is, this could be a negotiating tactic to get the European Union to step it up and rearm and contribute more to NATO.
And he was quite effective in this. This is one of his accomplishments from the first term, is that he moved more countries in the direction of the 2%, percent of GDP spending on defense. But I was surprised to see that as of 2024, Canada still doesn't pay 2%. Spain is woefully behind 2%. Portugal, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg. And so I agree with you that this is what people are seeing. The other thing is, In terms of, and look, what Trump and what Vance and Trump have done this week and Musk is shameful, right, in terms of turning our back on an ally. But the notion that this war in Ukraine could be, and, it was started by Russia, let's be clear.
Well, not if you listen to what Trump is saying.
I know,
He's
but
blaming Ukraine.
let's be clear. It can't go on forever. I mean, it can go on forever, but the American taxpayer is worried about the continuing funding and support for Ukraine with absolutely no efforts to reach a negotiated
Right.
settlement.
And we have to admit, though, and I'm with you here, Rick, that Trump's approach is over the top.
Of course.
The idea that you're calling Zelensky a dictator, a traitor, whatever the disparaging term was, I think is a bit much. But the idea of asking for the fact that he asked for Ukraine's minerals in exchange for getting more money, that was first put on the table by Zelensky. So I think the reporting around this needs to be more comprehensive, but also we need to consider just not that it's Trump, but does it make sense? And that's been his approach. Yeah, he's driven by, profit. That's going to be the guiding principle for everything, but also some of the stuff makes sense.